I don't do these videos a lot because they are very hard to make. Each of these videos takes around 9 hours to complete as I perfect the script, gather the information, and I come up with a complete thought on whatever I'm talking about. That said, everyone loves these videos and I love to give my opinion, so today we're going to be asking the question, should you buy Intel Kaby Lake? Kaby Lake is the codename used by Intel for a processor family that was released in August of 2016. It came after Skylake, which was very well viewed by consumers and is, at the point of recording, Intel's newest processor family. It consists of CPUs like this i7 7700K and the i5 7600K, along with many others. Intel's newest processors cost more than $117 for anything higher than an i3. Once you dip into the Pentium and Celeron processors, you can go under $100, with the lowest Celeron, the G3930T, going for only $42. The higher end CPUs can go for as much as $350 for something like the 7700K. However, you're likely going to pay in the $150 to $250 range for a new processor, as that's where most of the CPUs fall. It's worth noting that the i5 and i7 models are very separated. The difference from a high-end i3 to a low-end i5 is around $10 to $20, but a high-end i5 to a low-end i7, the difference is around $70. Let's look into the specs of the processor family. Aside from an improved 14nm process, which results in slightly higher clock speeds and turbo frequencies, not a lot has changed from Skylake. It does improve performance in 4K video playback, and it has some more advanced features like better encoding and decoding of things like H.264. However, besides that, there's not a whole lot different from Skylake as far as performance and features go. There is one notable thing Kaby Lake brings to the table. On the lower end of the market, Kaby Lake marked the first time desktop Pentium CPUs had hyperthreading. If you don't know what hyperthreading is, the simple explanation is that it creates more logical processors for the computer to use. This effectively made a dual-core CPU show the performance close to a non-hyperthreaded quad-core CPU. This was very exciting for a low-end market. However, don't be fooled by how it performed. They were still dual-core CPUs and were not as even close to as powerful as the infamous 6700K or the 6400 in performance. They were hyper-threaded, which was great, but they were still dual-core CPUs, so the power was limited. With Kaby Lake came the 200 series chipset. This new chipset contained very minor improvements over the Z170 chipset that was so popular with Skylake CPUs. The biggest improvement with this chipset came in the form of M.2 slots. This wasn't the first time M.2 was associated with Intel. However, a new type of M.2 was supported with the Kaby Lake chipsets. Intel Optane memory, which is a more efficient type of M.2 memory that was not supported on earlier boards, was made a new feature in the 200 series chipset. However, the 200 series chipset was not required for Intel Kaby Lake processors, as you can use a motherboard with a 100 series chipset after you updated the BIOS. Compatibility with the Kaby Lake CPUs was not an issue. They were all fully compatible with the most existing x86 and x86-64 operating systems. The support was a different story. Some CPU features were not supported on select operating systems. Adding salt to the wound, in mid-January of 2017, Microsoft announced that the only Windows platform to support Kaby Lake processors would be the newest Windows 10 platform. In the same announcement, they said that all future processors under Windows will follow this trend and only be supported by the latest Windows platform of the time of release. Intel has confirmed this, announcing no official Kaby Lake drivers will be available for Windows 7 or any version of Windows 8. This was later proven partially false, as Intel eventually produced drivers such as the HD Graphics 620 driver for Windows 7 and 8 on its Download Center website. TDP was kept very similar, if not the same, as previous generation families. For desktop processors, high power was shown by the letter K, and they consumed 91 watts of power. Medium power lacked any kind of symbol or sign and consumed 65 watts of power, while low power CPUs were designated by the letter T, and they consumed a mere 35 watts of power. For scale, these CPUs are more power efficient than your Keurig brewer, your hair dryer, and your electric toothbrush. Mobile processors followed very similarly. The high-powered CPUs were designated by the letter H and took 35 to 45 watts to power. Mediums were shown by the letter U and took 15 or 28 watts to power, and the lower-end CPUs were designated with the letter Y and used a small 4.5 watts to power. These processors are more power efficient than a sewing machine, a carving knife, and a black and white television. These processors showed minimal improvement over Skylake processors, but improvement nonetheless. The top-end 7700K scored 26 points higher than the 6700K and Cinebench R15, a highly rated CPU benchmark that people have been using for years. However, in certain tests like this one seen here, the new Kaby Lake processors did not always outperform its younger brother, being beat by 6 points in this test. The Skylake processor beat the newest Kaby Lake in this Blender test too, showing that the newest is not always the best. However, the 7700K did outperform the older 6700K in Firestrike. This is showing that it has a slight edge when it comes to gaming. This is confirmed by this graph that shows better frame rates than its counterpart in a real game scenario. Kaby Lake also had some problems with overclocking. It reached higher than normal temps when being pushed. A lot of people gave the processor a black mark for this. I personally am not a fan of overclocking, but a huge part of the PC community is. With the newest Intel CPUs being a little bit harder to overclock than the Skylake processors, some people decided to write off Kaby Lake as a whole and wait until the 8th generation comes out, because overclocking could be legitimately dangerous to the newest processors. However, as the processors adapted to the wild with drivers and BIOS updates, some reviewers and smart overclockers were able to push almost all the processors close to or past 5.0 GHz. This was very dependent on the motherboard. Over time, it became clear that you need a nice motherboard to overclock as high as some people would like. Asus became small-time famous for being the company that really pushed the limits of these new processors and created motherboards that made it very easy to push the CPUs to the limit, as long as you're willing to shell as much as $300. I want to be clear here. I'm not saying you can't overclock without one of these motherboards. All I'm saying is that these boards were made for overclocking these chips, and a lot of people in the community were discouraged. Achieving higher clock speeds cost a higher premium than it did in generations past. It also is worth noting that Kaby Lake was the first family to have a legitimate way to break the 5.0 GHz barrier, something that people have been trying to do for years. Certain families have been hitting walls around 4.5 or 4.7. However, with Kaby Lake, under the right conditions and a good cooler, people have clocked over 5.0 GHz. Very impressive. Coffee Lake and Ryzen are both coming too. Coffee Lake can be expected by the end of the year and the beginning of next year. Ryzen is locked down on March 2nd with pre-order starting February 22nd. The release is just under a week away, and that is a huge factor when looking at buying a new CPU right now. From what we've seen, Ryzen is looking to really shake things up, and we have no idea how that's going to affect the market. Will Intel CPU prices drop? Maybe. Will Ryzen totally flop? It's a possibility. Then there's Coffee Lake. That's already promising as much as a 20% increase in performance from Kaby Lake. The CPU market is going to be very different at this time next month. In my opinion, Kaby Lake was a cash grab. The family came out less than a year after Skylake and proved to be minimal in improvements or features. Things like improved H.246 decoding are things only people doing very, very specialized work will notice, and even then, you might not notice it. Now, Intel didn't advertise these chips as the best thing that's ever happened to computers, but at the same time, we as consumers expect the next generation of whatever we are buying, whether that's consoles, processors, or cell phones, to be better than the last, and the fact that Kaby Lake was beaten by Skylake in some tests, that's downright terrible. There's no reason to put out a new product that's only better than the last generation in certain situations. Imagine if the iPhone 8 came out and the only place it improved in was having a better camera, but only in certain situations. Imagine this, the new iPhone comes out and the only place it improved is the camera, and the only time the camera is better is when you're standing under an evergreen tree in the middle of winter. No one would buy it. It's the same thing with Kaby Lake processors. There are two reasons to buy this family. One, you're building your first PC and Kaby Lake just came out. Or two, you're in one of those very small fields where you need faster H.246 decoding and Intel Optane memory support. But even then, is it really worth it, another $200 and a new motherboard? Even if you don't get a new motherboard, do you really want to go and update your BIOS, which, if you haven't done, is incredibly annoying? It's not super hard, and it's not an advanced process, but it's just really annoying to do. So ask yourself, is it worth it to drop $200 or whatever dollars? Is it worth it to reinstall your CPU? Is it worth it when Ryzen and Coffee Lake are coming within the next 10 months? No, it's really not. Not even if your old i7 just died on you and you need a new one. Honestly, pick up a 6700K. It's a great CPU and it's going to hold up for another 3 or 4 years. Maybe grab an i5 6400. It's a great low to mid budget CPU that gets great price to performance numbers. Look into other options and find something that will work for you, because Kaby Lake, in almost all situations, is not only a bad investment, but it's a bad CPU family, especially with Skylake. Skylake is absolutely great, and it really is the next generation processor family that Kaby Lake is not. Kaby Lake is a cash grab and can barely be called a new generation. The smallest improvements were made to look so big. So no, you should not buy Intel's Kaby Lake. That was what I think is my longest video to date, and that's super exciting, and it was definitely my most researched one, so like I said in the beginning, it took a long time to make. Anyway, all my sources, including my graphs and all other information I gathered, is down there in the description if you want to make your own conclusions. With that, my name is Z-Star. If you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, then go down in the comments down below and tell me why you rated it like you did, and I'll see you guys in the next video.